My parents said, "The greatest gift for your sister's wedding is if you disappear forever." I didn't beg. I packed my things, took the car keys, closed the door behind me, like a final punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I never wanted to write. The next morning, I listed my apartment for sale, called the bank, froze the joint account my father thought I'd forgotten existed. My name is Chloe Morrison. And this is the story of how my family's cruelty became their downfall. What happened 4 years ago broke me. What happened last week made me whole. They wanted me gone. They forgot who paid the bills. Growing up, I always knew my sister Madison was the golden one. She was 2 years younger, prettier, louder, easier to love. Robert and Linda Morrison made it clear who mattered most. She was their little princess. I was the extra line in a story already written. When I graduated college, they took me to a cheap restaurant. When Madison got into community college, they threw a party for 50 people. I built a career in marketing, bought my own condo, traveled the world. She bounced between part-time jobs and came home broke. Guess who they called responsible? Her. Guess who they called selfish? Me. Still, I kept showing up. Family dinners, holidays, birthdays. I brought gifts, carried conversations, and swallowed every insult disguised as concern. Then came her engagement. 8 months of dating, and suddenly she was the family's miracle. Every dinner turned into a wedding planning meeting. I offered to help, even offered to pay. They looked at me like I was interrupting something sacred. 2 weeks before the wedding, Madison exploded over a missing seat at the reception. "One extra guest ruins everything," she screamed. Then she turned to me, eyes full of venom. "This is your fault. You ruin everything." I waited for my parents to defend me. They didn't. My father sighed. "Maybe Madison has a point, Chloe." And then my mother, soft, rehearsed, said the words that cracked my spine. "You always make things heavier, Chloe. You never seem happy." I looked around that living room, their laughter, her tantrum, my silence, and realized I'd been standing outside my own family for years. I laughed, because they were right about one thing. I wasn't happy. Not with them. They wanted peace. I gave them silence. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or beg. I just packed 3 suitcases, 1 wooden box from my grandmother, and every piece of dignity they couldn't steal. While Madison slept off her meltdown, I stood in the doorway of my childhood room. The posters were gone, but the air still smelled like dust and disappointment. I closed the door quietly. They didn't deserve the sound of goodbye. The next morning, I called my realtor. The market was strong. She said we could list my condo within a week. Then I called the bank. There was one account my father never thought I'd touch. The joint account we'd opened years ago for family emergencies. It held $47,000. I'd deposited 45 of it. The banker confirmed I could withdraw my contributions immediately. So I did. A hold was placed on the rest, 72 hours before the funds cleared. Perfect. Madison's wedding was in 8 days. Their perfect day now had a price tag. 2 days later, the phone started buzzing. First Mom, then Dad, then Madison's dramatic voicemails about ruining her life. I didn't answer. On day 5, Mom showed up at my office during lunch. Her makeup cracked under the heat. "Chloe, we need to talk," she whispered. I smiled politely. "No, we don't. You made that clear." She grabbed my arm. "It was just stress. Madison didn't mean it." "I know," I said. "You didn't either." She blinked, lost for words. "The wedding is in a week. We can't access the money." "That's not my problem anymore." I kept my voice calm, almost kind. "You wanted me to disappear. I'm just honoring your wish." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. That afternoon, I accepted a job offer in Seattle, a 20% raise and a signing bonus. The same day, Madison's dream wedding shrank into a cash bar and store-bought cake. I heard about it through a friend. Apparently, she cried through the ceremony. Not because she missed me, but because her fantasy couldn't afford itself anymore. The next morning, I boarded a one-way flight to Seattle. The clouds swallowed the city below, and with it, everything I used to owe them. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like silence, finally quiet enough to breathe. When the plane landed, no one waited for me. No guilt, no tension. Just the clean, unfamiliar air of a life that was finally mine. I didn't look back. They wanted me gone. I left and took the foundation with me. Seattle gave me something I didn't recognize at first. Quiet. No buzzing phones. No crisis disguised as family. Jessica called one rainy Thursday. Her voice was careful, almost apologetic. Chloe, I'm so sorry. Your grandfather passed away. The floor didn't drop. It shifted. Like an elevator stopping between floors. I hadn't been invited to the funeral. No texts. No voicemail. Just a rumor carried by kindness. 2 days later, his lawyer reached out. He asked if I could join a remote reading. I sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, breath thin. He began with the formalities. Estate inventory, account numbers, appraisals, house, investments, life insurance. Even the classic cars he polished every Sunday. Then he said my name. Chloe Morrison. Silence gathered between syllables. To my granddaughter Chloe, I leave my entire estate. The entire room went still, even through a screen. Madison received $5,000 and a letter. My parents received nothing. And a sentence saying they had shown their character. The valuation landed near $2 million. Numbers I never expected to hear out loud. Not a jackpot. A responsibility with his name etched beneath mine. I didn't gloat. I couldn't. I pressed my palms against the cool table and waited to breathe. The lawyer sent one more envelope. A letter my grandfather wrote in his careful, tilting hand. He'd seen the way they spoke to me. He'd seen me try again and again. He wrote that love isn't measured by performance, and that dignity sometimes looks like walking away. He said he was proud of me. He said to build a life I chose. He said not to wait for their permission to be happy. I cried on the kitchen floor finally. Face in my hands, salt and relief stinging old wounds. The messages started almost immediately. Family should stick together. He wasn't thinking clearly. The ethical thing is to split it evenly. I didn't reply. Instead, I met with a planner. We set aside taxes. Invested the rest with boring discipline. I put a down payment on a quiet house above the Sound. I donated $50,000 to a group for estranged adults. I named a small scholarship after him. For first-generation students cut off by family. Therapy became a weekly anchor. Dr. Martinez mapped the pattern I survived. Scapegoat, enabler, golden child, debt collector. You can't fix a system you didn't build, she said. You can only stop funding it. Seattle kept raining. I kept breathing. Grief and gratitude shared a small, hard chair inside me. I didn't ask why he chose me. He already told me. Because he saw me when they refused to look. They didn't mourn me. They mourned the money. It started with a letter from a law firm back home. Thick paper, thin excuses. My father was suing me. Financial elder abuse and unjust enrichment. He claimed I manipulated my grandfather's will. That I stole money from the family account. That I'd abandoned them and caused emotional distress. The words made me laugh. Not loud, just enough to taste the irony. They were running out of money. Madison's marriage had collapsed. The family house was falling apart. And somehow it was still my fault. I called Patricia Chen, a Seattle attorney known for ending bullies politely. She read through the claim in silence. Then she smiled. They picked the wrong person to lie about. We didn't just defend. We countered. Defamation. Harassment. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we filed a motion to make every communication public record. That included the recordings, the emails, the voicemails. Patricia looked at me like a general reviewing weapons. Are you ready for them to hear their own words in court? I nodded. I've been ready for 4 years. The hearing room smelled like dust and nerves. They looked smaller than I remembered. Dad's hair had gone gray. Mom's eyes were hollow. Madison's smile trembled on contact. Their lawyer tried to paint me as cruel, a daughter fueled by revenge. Then Patricia pressed play. The speakers filled the courtroom. Dad's voice, calm, deliberate. The greatest gift for your sister's wedding is if you disappear forever. Mom's voice followed. You always make things heavier, Chloe. And Madison's laugh, sharp as glass. No editing. No denial left. Screenshots flashed across the display. Text messages. Emails. Madison's old post. Finally some peace now that she's gone. And then the drunk email she'd sent me a year later. Don't come back. We're better without you. The judge leaned back, exhausted and disgusted. He ruled fast. Their lawsuit, dismissed. My counterclaim, approved. Damages awarded in full. But the real victory came in his closing words. The plaintiffs demanded their daughter remove herself from their lives, then sued her for doing exactly that. This court finds their actions reprehensible. Outside, rain was falling. The parking lot shimmered under gray light. They stood together, the perfect picture of regret. But regret isn't redemption. It's just recognition too late. Dad tried again. Chloe, please. Mom's voice cracked. Madison cried, mascara bleeding down her face. I took one step back. then another. The distance felt holy. Behind me, the courthouse doors swung shut. The sound echoed like a gavel, final and clean. For the first time in years, my silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom pronounced out loud. They asked me to vanish. The court made it permanent. 2 weeks after the ruling, the silence finally felt permanent. No letters. No calls. No more lawyers. The bridge was gone, burned clean on both sides. And somehow, I didn't miss the smoke. Marcus and I started house hunting that weekend. We found one near the water. Big windows, quiet mornings, light spilling across polished floors. He said, "It feels like peace." He was right. The realtor asked if I wanted to write a letter to the sellers. I almost laughed. I'd written enough letters for one lifetime, most of them unanswered. Some nights, I still wake up expecting the phone to ring. But it doesn't. And that stillness is its own kind of mercy. People ask if I ever regret taking it to court. If I should have been the bigger person, I smile and tell them the truth. I already was. I just stopped shrinking to fit inside their love. Last month, I started a small foundation for adults cut off by family. People told they were too much when all they wanted was to be enough. We call it the Morrison Fund because healing sometimes means turning your last name into something that finally helps someone. Our wedding is next month. Small, honest, full of laughter. The morning light spills through the new kitchen windows. And for a second, I catch my reflection smiling back. No ghosts, no guilt. Just me, finally home. My grandfather's old friend will walk me down the aisle. My chosen family will be there. My past won't. I used to think freedom meant running away. Now I know better. Freedom means walking forward and never looking back. They wanted me gone. I chose to be free before saying goodbye. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true family betrayal stories. That reminds us we are stronger than we think.
I was 19 when my sister called me an embarrassment. She didn't scream it. That wasn't her style. She just said it the way people say things they've already decided are facts. You make things harder than they have to be, Sarah. It's exhausting. She was pre-law at the time, already walking like the world would open its doors before she ever had to knock. I was studying psychology, working 2 jobs, and losing sleep over the things no one else in our house wanted to talk about, especially what I saw in Dad's office. Especially the documents he thought I didn't understand. A week after that conversation, I came home to find the locks changed. There was no note, no warning. Just a trash bag of my clothes on the porch, still damp from the sprinkler. My mother stood behind the living room curtain, pretending not to watch. When I knocked, she didn't come to the door. But a minute later, my phone buzzed. "This is what happens when you don't respect boundaries," her text read. They said I was unstable, overly emotional. But the truth was, I wasn't breaking down, I was waking up. I had taken one file, just one. A report that linked a private security contractor one Dad used to consult for to a string of misconduct cases buried under bureaucracy. I didn't go to the press. I didn't even confront him. I reported it quietly through the proper channels. 2 weeks later, the call came. Not from a journalist, but from a recruiter. Someone who said my name had come up in an internal referral list. I thought it was a prank at first. Then I remembered something my aunt used to say before she passed. Sometimes the door that slams in your face is just making space for one that opens louder. So I left Tucson. No dramatic goodbye. No suitcase, just a backpack. 2 textbooks and a folder full of student loan paperwork I never got to use. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not because I was running, because I needed to build a version of myself they'd never be able to touch again. The first bus out of town pulled away at 3:42 a.m. I watched the desert disappear behind me in pieces. By dawn, I had chosen a new name. By nightfall, I had no home, but I finally had a reason. In a bathroom stall at a Greyhound station outside Flagstaff, I cut my hair with a pair of scissors meant for fabric. I watched long black strands fall into the sink like the last traces of a story I didn't owe anyone anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I just kept cutting until I saw someone else in the mirror. I registered as Vale S. at a small day labor agency 2 towns over. Just enough name to work, not enough to find. The first few weeks I slept wherever was safe, sometimes on the floor of a shelter, sometimes in the back corner of a laundromat that didn't ask questions. I cleaned diners before they opened sorted crates behind warehouses, delivered food on a borrowed bike. Every dollar I made went toward one thing: night school. I signed up for online courses under a scholarship I wasn't sure I qualified for. I passed every exam like it was a test no one believed I'd take. At one point, I shared a studio apartment with 3 women, all older, all undocumented. They never asked where I was from. I never asked why they prayed before every meal in a language I didn't speak. We existed in quiet understanding, each of us holding something we didn't want the world to see. Then one night, a man named Bishop left a card for me at the front desk of the job placement center. No title, just a government extension and a sticky note that read, "You did the right thing. Let's talk." I didn't call right away. I carried the card in my wallet for weeks, afraid it might be bait or, worse, a test. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Someone had seen what I reported, and instead of burying it, they passed my name forward. When I finally called, Bishop didn't sound surprised. "We've been watching you," he said plainly. "Not in a bad way. In a, you might belong here way." I wasn't sure what here meant yet, but I said yes. And a month later, I was on a train headed north to Oregon, my backpack a little heavier. My silence finally doing something louder than any apology I was never given. Quantico broke a lot of people. It didn't break me, but it did burn through who I used to be. I learned to run on 4 hours of sleep and cold resolve. I learned to shoot without blinking and lie without trembling. I learned how to vanish in plain sight. My scores were average in the beginning. Not because I lacked the skill, but because I never asked for attention. Eventually, that became my advantage. No one suspects the quiet one. No one watches the one who doesn't need to be seen. By the time I graduated, I wasn't top of the class. I wasn't bottom either. I was unremarkable, and that made me perfect. They placed me with a small unit specializing in human trafficking cases connected to financial laundering rings. I analyzed patterns, cross-referenced visas, followed money. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. It was easier to stay in motion than to remember how I got there. Years passed. I moved through cities, aliases, assignments. I answered to Vale, to S. Reed, to whatever name kept the work clean and the trail cold. Sometimes I wondered if my mother ever lit a candle for me. Sometimes I hoped she didn't. Then one night I was sitting alone in the Portland field office scrolling through preliminary reports when a familiar name caught my eye. I stared at the screen long enough for the coffee to go cold. Callie Velez Defense Counsel listed on a case involving a client tied to a Sinaloan-linked laundering front. But I knew that name wasn't real, and I knew exactly who she was. Isla Velez. Born Isla Varela, my sister. Same curl in the signature. Same law degree from Arizona. Same woman who once stood in a kitchen and told our parents I was a risk to our reputation. Now she was defending someone whose money ran through back doors I'd been chasing for 6 months. I didn't say anything. Not that night. Not to my supervisor. Not to the team. But I flagged the file and marked it for reassignment under Special Audit 42B, a code used when internal ties might compromise external integrity. They'd ask questions later. They always did. But I already knew what I was going to do, because this time I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was walking straight into the house I was told to forget. I didn't wear my badge. I didn't need to. The courtroom was cold, all glass, and polished wood tucked behind a city building where the ceilings echoed when no one spoke. I slipped into the back row during pre-trial motions dressed in gray slacks and a dark coat, just another body in the gallery. No one noticed me at first. Not the clerk. Not the bailiff. Not even her. Isla sat at the defense table, flipping through a binder like she already knew the outcome. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, pulled into a sleek bun. Her lips lined in confidence. She looked like someone who never had to run to survive. But I knew that posture. I knew what it was hiding. The man beside her, her client, sat stone-faced fingers drumming quietly against the wood. I recognized him from the files. Money laundering, wire fraud, suspected cartel ties. Too clean to catch, too connected to scare. And now Isla was defending him. The hearing was procedural, suppression motion, chain of custody debate. But then the judge glanced toward the gallery. Her eyes caught mine. She froze. Counsel, she said slowly, turning back toward Isla. Is that Agent Vale in the back row? The words weren't loud, but they landed like thunder. Isla stiffened. The defense attorney beside her, an older man with a tired tie, followed her gaze. I saw Isla's face twist first in confusion, then recognition. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her jaw clenched. My mother was there too. I hadn't known she'd come. She sat 2 rows ahead beside a man I didn't recognize, her rosary half wrapped in her hand. She turned slowly, like part of her already knew. Her face didn't move, but her fingers tightened around the beads. No one said my name again. The judge recovered and resumed the motion. The room kept breathing, but not deeply. Reporters whispered behind laptops. A woman in the gallery typed something into her phone so fast her nails clicked against the glass. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, back straight, hands folded. I wasn't there to intervene. I was there to be seen, and apparently that was enough. When the hearing adjourned, I stood, nodded once to the clerk, and left through the same side door I came in. But I didn't take off the coat, because I wasn't hiding anymore. The invitation came 3 days after the hearing. Not from Isla, not from my mother. From a shared cousin I hadn't heard from in years. She used the word reconnect like it had never been broken in the first place. We'd love to see you, the message said. Just dinner, just family. I said yes. Not because I believed them, but because I needed to see how far they'd go. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Same beige walls, same brittle front yard. Inside, it smelled like citrus cleaner and old expectations. My mother met me at the door, her arms opening too slowly to seem natural. My father stood stiff near the kitchen, tie-loosened sleeves rolled. Isla sat at the far end of the table, quiet, a glass of wine untouched in front of her. Dinner was enchiladas and strained conversation. They asked if I was tired from work. They said the weather had been strange. They complimented my posture. We pretended, all of us. And then, halfway through a story about a neighbor's promotion, my mother cleared her throat. We were wondering, she said, fingers curling around the edge of her napkin, if maybe you might know someone in the DA's office who could take another look. Isla didn't speak. She just stared at her plate. My father added, it wouldn't be official. Just a conversation. You know how these things work. I picked up my glass, set it down slowly. If I weren't with the bureau, I said calmly, would I even be at this table? Silence. My mother's mascara smudged at the corner of her eye. My father straightened his sleeves like adjusting fabric could fix history. Isla finally looked at me, really looked, and I could tell she wasn't expecting me to say no. But I already had. Not with words, with everything I'd become in the years they didn't ask about. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and stood. They didn't stop me. They just watched as I walked out again. Only this time I didn't need to look back to know I wasn't the one leaving empty. It surfaced late on a Sunday. A grainy video clip barely a minute long, pixelated but unmistakable. Me, 20 years old, drunk, laughing, vulnerable in a way that wasn't meant for cameras or strangers. I knew exactly where it came from. He had threatened to release it once after I left him. I thought he lost it. I thought I had. The headlines came fast. Agents passed under scrutiny. FBI silent as scandal brews. They called it a moral lapse. They called me reckless, compromised, unprofessional. They didn't call it what it was. Assault. My team panicked. My supervisor wanted a press strategy. Legal flagged potential defamation. HR scheduled a wellness check. But I said nothing. I didn't need to, because I'd already lived through the shame, already buried the version of me they thought they could weaponize. Then my phone rang. Dad, flashing across the screen like a name I hadn't spoken in years. I let it ring twice before answering. You're dragging our name through the mud, he snapped. No greeting, no hesitation. Just accusation. That's what this is. Attention-seeking, vindictive. We raised you better than this. I held the phone closer to my ear. Let his voice spill through. Let it echo. I didn't drag anything I said evenly. I carried that name through the fire. Alone. While you let it burn me. There was a pause. Just long enough to matter. Then a click. He hung up. The next day, my inbox flooded with media requests. I turned down every one. That night, I stood in my apartment, pulled out the box I kept in the back of the closet, the one with old journals and receipts from bus tickets no one knew I bought. I lit a single match and let the video play once on my laptop. Then I closed the screen, slid the box back into the dark, and whispered, "You don't get to win just because I survived you." Then I went back to work, because the storm they sent was already weather I'd lived through, and I was still standing. I didn't answer their questions. I didn't grant interviews. I didn't offer a tearful explanation or a carefully worded press release. I wrote a bill. It started as a quiet outline on a notepad at 3 in the morning, while my phone vibrated with gossip disguised as journalism. Then it became a policy draft, then a proposal, then something with weight, the Federal Kinship Interference Bill, designed to protect whistleblowers and public servants from coercion, blackmail, or intimidation rooted in family ties, because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who try hardest to silence you. I sent the draft to a colleague in the ethics committee. No explanation. Just the work. The language was sharp surgical. I knew exactly where the loopholes lived because I had bled through them. A month later, I was invited to testify. Capitol Hill, Room 214B, Subcommittee on Civil Oversight. I wore navy, no makeup, no entourage, just notes and memory. "Thank you, Chairwoman," I began. "I'm not here to name names. I'm here because some of the most dangerous pressure doesn't come from the press or the public. It comes from living rooms, from people who raised us then tried to use us." The room was quiet. Not because they didn't understand, but because too many of them did. I never said father, never said sister, but I saw recognition bloom in their faces anyway. One congresswoman from Illinois leaned forward during questioning. "Agent Vale," she asked gently, "is this about you?" I looked her in the eye. "No," I said. "It's about everyone like me." The bill passed out of committee with full bipartisan support. Reporters stopped calling me a scandal. They started calling me a strategist, a reformer. Even the headlines grew teeth. She turned trauma into statute. When bloodlines betray law, steps in. But that wasn't why I did it. I did it for the girl I used to be. The one who stood on a porch with a trash bag and no answers. The one who was told to stay quiet. And for the ones coming next who might never have to walk through fire alone. Because now there's a law on the books, one they didn't see coming. And I'm just getting started. She didn't make an appointment. My assistant just knocked eyes uncertain and said, "She's in the lobby." I didn't ask who. I already knew. Isla stood in the doorway 2 minutes later, small in a way I'd never seen. No makeup, no press behind her, no silver words to coat her guilt. Just jeans, a plain blouse, and the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. I didn't offer a seat. She took one anyway. For a while we didn't speak. The hum of the air vent did all the talking. Then finally she looked up. "I was jealous of you," she said. "Before I even knew why, you were always louder without trying. And I hated that." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I just needed to say that." I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. "You didn't break me," I said softly. "You just proved how easy it was for everyone to leave me behind." She nodded. No tears. Just a quiet acceptance that this wasn't forgiveness. It was fact. No hug followed. No dramatic closing line. She stood paused and walked out as quietly as she came. I didn't watch her leave. I just opened my laptop again, scrolled to the next page of my report, and got back to work. The forum wasn't televised. No press passes, no microphones. Just folding chairs in a federal hall occupied by people who had carried silence like a second spine. I stood at the podium without notes. I didn't need them. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about protection. For the ones who tried to do the right thing and got left behind for it." I introduced the Witness Line Project, a national support initiative for whistleblowers facing internal retaliation from family ties, especially in law enforcement politics and public institutions. There were nods, a few tearful stares, a stillness that didn't come from disinterest but recognition. And in the back row, my mother. Hands folded, eyes glassy. She didn't speak, but she stayed until the end. My father wasn't there. He never asked. Isla sent an email that night, just 4 lines. Thank you for saying it out loud. For all of us who couldn't. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. You were. I read it once, then archived it. Because some things don't need responses. Some wounds just need air and time. And I wasn't here to answer for them anymore. I was here to speak for the ones who never had a witness. The room was already full when I arrived. I slipped in quietly, no fanfare, no press badge, just a plain blazer and a nameplate that read Vale S. It wasn't my event. It didn't need to be. A new class of recruits stood on stage, crisp suits and steady hands. One of them, barely out of college, paused at the mic and said I joined because of her. She pointed toward the crowd, toward me. A few heads turned, a few cameras clicked. But I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I just listened. Afterward, as people trickled out, someone touched my arm gently. An older woman, a retired field agent. We're proud of you, she said. Not loud, but sure. I nodded. I'm proud of me too. And I meant it. Outside, the air was cool. No reporters waited, no flashbulbs, just the quiet rhythm of evening and the city moving on. I walked home without checking my phone, without looking back, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to be applauded to know the work mattered. And this time, the silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like peace. Sold Celeste's voice rang out over the phone, syrupy and smug. 2.4 million L. Not bad for an old shack with peeling shutters and outdated wiring, right? My grip on the coffee mug tightened until my knuckles ached. I was standing in my Boston apartment, the early sunlight painting the floor golden, but my body felt ice cold. You sold it. The beach house? Yes, she said like it was nothing. Don't look so surprised. No one's touched the place in years. It was just rotting on that coastline. I found a buyer who adores the rustic vibe. You're welcome. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Celeste, that house wasn't just property. It was Grandma Mirabelle's. And she left it to both of us. Celeste interrupted. I know, but I'm the executor of the estate. Remember, I had full authority to make the call. You were too busy closing court cases or chasing your next promotion to be involved. My chest burned. That doesn't give you the right to sell without my consent. She let out a dry laugh. Oh, please. You never cared about that house. You skipped half the estate meetings, always too busy to fly back. I've handled everything: funeral planning, taxes, maintenance. I earned that sale. I blinked, the words thudding against my ribs. The beach house was where Grandma taught us to swim, where we played board games on stormy nights and watched fireworks from the porch. It wasn't just a house. It was the last piece of her that still breathed. Celeste continued oblivious. Don't worry, I'm putting your share to good use. Thatcher's always dreamed of a yacht. This way we all win. I couldn't speak. Anyway, the paperwork's finalized. The buyers take possession next week. You might want to clear out whatever junk you left behind. I already took the valuable stuff. You're welcome. The call ended before I could say another word. My hand dropped to my side phone, still in my grasp. The apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of traffic outside. In that quiet, I could still hear Grandma Mirabelle's laugh echoing from the porch, her wind chimes dancing by the sea. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. She'd given me a silver key at her funeral, pressed it into my hand, and said, "When the time is right, you'll know what to do." Maybe that time was now. The key had always been a mystery. It rested on a slender chain tucked beneath my blouse every day since Grandma Mirabelle's funeral. You'll know when she had said softly, clasping my hand around it, her fingers cool and steady. I hadn't questioned her then, too wrecked by grief, too consumed with sorting probate documents and legal minutiae from a distance. The key had become a quiet weight I carried, more emotional than functional. Now, it pulsed against my chest like a signal. I set my coffee down and stepped into my home office. Scrolling through old contacts, I found the number and pressed call before I could overthink it. Wendell Harrow, came the voice, still crisp, still composed. "It's Eloise Maddox," I said. "Grandma's granddaughter." A pause. "Then I've been expecting your call." She sold the beach house, Wendell. "Celeste, Said it's finalized, that I had no say. Another pause. The sound of paper rustling. I received notice this morning. I thought it might come to this. Tell me, Eloise, have you been inside Mirabelle's study since she passed? I hesitated. No, I haven't had the time. She left very specific instructions regarding that room. Instructions meant only for you. Celeste knows nothing about them. I swallowed hard. You think there's something important in there? I know there is. Mirabelle was not one to leave anything to chance. She anticipated conflict. Of course she did. Grandma could read people like legal briefs. She saw through charm predicted behavior and always played the long game. She had watched Celeste's vanity grow just as she had watched me retreat into career, believing it was strength. I can catch a train to Newport, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Good. I'll meet you at the station. And Eloise, bring the key. I glanced down at the chain, the delicate silver glinting beneath my collar. I unclasped it gently, running my thumb over its grooves. After all this time, it might finally have something to unlock. And I had a feeling it wasn't just a door. The house smelled exactly the same salt air, old wood lavender from Grandma's linen drawer. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting long shadows across the floorboards as I stepped into the study, heart thudding. Wendell waited quietly in the doorway, giving me space. This room had always felt like her mind made visible, orderly chaos. Papers stacked in neat piles, maps of the coastline pinned to the wall, her fountain pens aligned just so. But what I needed wasn't in plain sight. She had once told me, half laughing, "Some things stay hidden because they're only meant for those who look with purpose." I walked to the back wall and ran my hand along the paneling beneath the bookshelf. There, faint but familiar, a tiny keyhole behind the sliding cabinet door. The key fit like it had been waiting. Inside the hidden safe was a thick envelope with my name in her handwriting, a leather-bound folder, and a stack of documents clipped together with a seal. I pulled everything out slowly, hands trembling. The first document was an amended deed, notarized and filed just 2 weeks before her death. The clause was printed clearly in bold, just above her signature. In the event that either heir attempts to sell the property without the full written consent of the other, all rights and ownership shall transfer irrevocably and entirely to the uninformed party. The character clause she'd titled it. It was dated. It was signed. It was legal. And Celeste had violated every word. I opened the envelope next. Inside was a letter written in Grandma's unmistakable voice, firm, warm, and devastatingly prescient. If you're reading this, my darling girl, then your sister has shown her true colors. I closed my eyes, breath-catching. Of course Grandma had planned for this. She'd known Celeste knew what flattery and pressure could lead her to do, and she'd known me too. That I'd be the one to hesitate, to wait too long, to trust too much. But not this time. I stood up, the amended deed in hand. Wendell stepped forward silently, reading the look on my face. "She did it?" I said. "She triggered the clause." He nodded. "Then the house is yours." I looked around the study one last time, and then toward the front door. It's time we told her. The conference room in Wendell's office was uncomfortably bright, the kind of sterile glow that made people look more nervous than they were. Celeste swept in 10 minutes late, her heels clacking across the floor like a warning. She wore her power blazer and that practiced smile that always curled at the edges when she knew she had the upper hand. Thatcher trailed behind her phone, in hand, jaw tight. Their attorney, young, fidgety, and clearly in over his head, looked like he regretted ever taking the case. "This better be quick," Celeste said, sliding into the chair across from me. "We're finalizing yacht paperwork this afternoon." I placed the folder on the table and met her eyes. "Then you'll want to pay attention." She rolled her eyes and leaned back, arms folded. "Here comes the moral speech." "No." Wendell said, his voice calm, but clipped. "This isn't about morality. It's about legality." He opened the file and laid out the amended deed in front of her, the official seal catching the light. Celeste blinked, then leaned forward. "What is this, an amendment filed by your grandmother 2 weeks before her death?" Wendell said. "It includes what she called the character clause." I watched the color drain from her face as she read the highlighted section. "She never told me about this." She said, her voice sharp. "I was the executor. I handled everything. Wendell nodded. And by attempting to sell the house without Eloise's written consent, you breached your fiduciary duty and triggered the clause. Thatcher's hand landed on her shoulder. That's not binding, right? It is, I said. It's notarized, filed, and enforceable. The young attorney flipped through the pages, his face paling. She's right. Legally, this supersedes the original deed. Celeste shook her head slowly, like the facts would rearrange themselves if she stalled long enough. But the sale already happened. The money's moved. The buyers. The sale is void, Wendell said. You acted without proper authority. And under this amendment, all ownership and control now fall to Eloise. Celeste stared at me stunned. For the first time in years, she didn't have a retort ready. I'm sorry, Celeste, I said, though the words didn't feel like mine. I didn't want it to be like this. She blinked fast. So that's it. You get everything now. I looked at the papers between us, the ones she had ignored and the ones I had finally learned to read. No, I said. I get what you tried to throw away. Wendell slid one final document across the table. And effective today, he added, Eloise is the sole estate manager. Celeste didn't move, not even when the pen rolled toward her. Celeste sat frozen in her chair, her eyes fixed on the letter Wendell had just handed her. The red wax seal bore Grandma's monogram, MRM, pressed deep into the paper. She turned it over slowly as if expecting it to vanish. I was supposed to get this when she asked, voice flat. If the character clause was triggered, Wendell replied. Her fingers trembled as she cracked the seal and unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved quickly at first, then slower. I watched the smugness dissolve, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years, uncertainty. She didn't speak for a while. When she finally looked up, her expression had sharpened. She thought I'd do this, she said, her voice edged with disbelief. She actually thought I would betray you. I held her gaze. She didn't think. She knew. Celeste slammed the letter down on the table. I was the good granddaughter I stayed. I handled the estate. I organized the memorial. You were off in Boston pretending you had more important things to do. You were here, I said gently, but you were never with her. You talked about loyalty like it was a currency. Grandma saw through that. She shook her head. So what, I'm the villain now? You think you're better because you showed up in the end with your fancy claws and your perfect timing? No, I said, leaning forward. I don't think I'm better. I think I listened, and I never used her death to climb a ladder. Celeste looked down again, her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did, I said. And now you have a choice. She didn't respond, just folded the letter neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Her hands were steady now, but her shoulders were slumped. The fight had gone out of her, but I didn't know yet if that was surrender or shame. Wendell rose quietly. You both have time to decide how this story ends. I stood too, gathering the documents into my briefcase. Celeste didn't look at me, but she didn't stop me either. As I stepped into the hallway, the echo of her voice caught up to me barely above a whisper. She always loved you more. I spent the next 2 days combing through every estate file Grandma had kept in the study. It wasn't just legal diligence, it was penance. I owed her that much. Each receipt, each account summary, each perfectly labeled envelope told me something she never said aloud. She trusted me to find the truth when it mattered. And I did. The expenses started small, routine maintenance, property taxes. Then the labels began to stretch: executive wellness retreat, garden re-landscaping, social dues reimbursement. I flipped through spa invoices, private car services, and quarterly payments to an exclusive country club where Grandma had never set foot. I wasn't just angry, I was sick. When Celeste showed up unannounced that evening, I didn't ask her to sit. I simply handed her the printouts. She skimmed the first few pages, her mouth tightening. I know how it looks. How it looks, I snapped. You used Grandma's money like it was your personal slush fund. She sank into the chair across from me. Thatcher said the returns would cover everything, double it even. It was supposed to be temporary. I stared at her. Returns. She looked away. He invested it. $800,000 in a development deal in Tampa. It was all going so well at first. And now she hesitated, then answered so quietly I barely heard her. The developer filed for bankruptcy last month. My stomach dropped. You used protected estate funds on a high-risk real estate scheme. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. Her voice broke. I just wanted to keep things together. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wanted to scream to shake her to remind her how Grandma had scraped together that money over a lifetime. But instead, I forced myself to breathe. Why didn't you come to me? Because you always had the answers, she said. And I didn't. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, less polished, less dangerous. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Neither did I. But I knew one thing: this wasn't just greed. This was a woman unraveling in silence, wearing pearls over panic. And now we were both standing in the ruins. Wendell listened without flinching as I walked him through everything: Tampa, the bankruptcy, the $800,000. He didn't ask me to repeat a word. When I was done, he folded his hands over his desk and exhaled, not surprised. Only saddened. She saw this coming, he said quietly. Not in detail, of course, but she knew who Celeste trusted and how easily charm can mask recklessness. I felt hollow. So what now? We sue, my sister frees her assets, press charges. Wendell opened the lower drawer of his desk and pulled out a thick navy folder. Your grandmother established a policy 2 years ago, a private insurance rider attached to the estate. It was created specifically for this scenario: unauthorized investment or misappropriation by any executor. I blinked. She insured herself against Celeste. No, Wendell said. She insured you against Celeste. He slid the folder across the desk. The policy covers up to $1 million in damages, but it requires a formal breach acknowledgement, signed by all parties involved, full financial counseling, legal detachment from future estate authority, meaning Celeste walks away. Forever. He nodded. I leaned back in the chair, processing. She wouldn't just lose control, she'd lose her place. Everything she built her identity around: being the executor, the organizer, the one who handled it all. Gone. What if she refuses? Then the insurance is void, and you'll have to pursue restitution in court. I looked down at my hands. For a brief moment, I imagined Celeste at the garden gate again, 9 years old, holding my hand after Grandpa's funeral. Back when neither of us knew what power or loss felt like. Just sisters standing side by side. Eloise Wendell said gently, "This protection is yours. But it doesn't come without cost." I nodded. I know. He placed a pen beside the agreement. Then it's time to decide. I reached for the folder fingers, brushing the embossed edge, and closed it slowly. If she's willing to sign, I said, I'll take care of the rest. And for the first time, I understood exactly what Grandma had meant by thinking 5 moves ahead. Celeste stared at the list of conditions like it was a sentence, not a solution. Her hands were clenched in her lap, her wedding ring glinting under the fluorescent light of Wendell's office. Liability, acknowledgement, counseling, full renunciation of rights, she read aloud, her voice thin. You really want me to sign away everything? It's the only way the insurance will cover the loss, I said. It protects the estate. It protects Grandma's name. Thatcher stood pacing near the window. This is ridiculous. You're not some criminal cell. You don't owe anyone an apology for trusting your husband. She flinched. Wendell folded his hands. You do owe accountability for misusing estate funds intentionally or not. That's the line Mirabelle drew. Thatcher turned on her. You're not actually considering this, are you? I am, she said quietly but clearly. His eyes narrowed. After everything I've done for you. She looked at him. After everything you cost me. Thatcher didn't argue. He just grabbed his coat and walked out. The door shut behind him like a final gavel. Celeste didn't cry. She simply signed her name at the bottom of each page, her handwriting steady. When she finished, she passed the folder to Wendell and turned to me. I don't know who I am without all of this, she said. But I want to find out. I nodded. Then we start here. She gave me a tired smile, fragile but real. And for the first time, I saw her not as the rival or the role, but as a woman finally stepping into something honest. We left Wendell's office together, no lawyers, no theatrics, just two sisters, and the long road ahead. I found her in the garden early one morning, sleeves rolled, knees dusted with soil, pulling weeds with more focus than I'd ever seen in her. The old rose bushes by the fence Grandma's favorites had gone wild in the years since she'd tended them, but beneath the thorns the roots were still strong. "They're not dead," Celeste said without looking up. "They just needed someone to notice." I knelt beside her, gloves in hand. "It's a start." We worked in silence for a while, clearing out broken branches, loosening the hardened earth. She didn't try to explain herself, and I didn't ask. The rhythm of shared effort said enough. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "I think I spent most of my life trying to prove I belonged. I thought if I stayed close enough to the family name to the role, maybe it would finally feel like mine." I glanced at her. It was never about what Grandma gave us. It was about who we were when she wasn't watching. She nodded slowly. "And I wasn't much of anything." "That's not true," I said. "But you got lost, and now you're finding your way back." Her shoulders softened. "If you'll let me." I pressed another layer of mulch around the base of a blooming stalk. "Keep showing up." She didn't say thank you, and I didn't need her to. This wasn't about apologies anymore. It was about rebuilding one root one morning, one honest act at a time. The garden had always been Grandma's sanctuary. Maybe now it could be ours. The bench sat beneath the old magnolia tree, just where Grandma used to read to us in the summer. A simple brass plaque bore her name and one line from her favorite poem, "What is rooted in truth cannot wither." Celeste stood beside it, hands folded, voice steady. She gave us more than a house. She gave us a place to come back to even when we lost ourselves. No designer dress, no spotlight, just her and the soil beneath her shoes. The small group neighbors, a few old family friends, listened quietly, and I stood at the edge watching not the speaker, but the sister who had learned to live without applause. She wasn't trying to be the favorite anymore. She wasn't reaching for approval or masking shame. She was just there, present, grounded, real. When she sat beside me on the bench, she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We watched the breeze pass through the roses she'd brought back to life, their petals open soft and still standing. Grandma would have loved that. We stayed there long after the others left, letting the silence fill in the places where words had once done damage. And for the first time, it felt like home again.